switching headphones. Can you guys hear me? Yes.
Your voice sounds very deep.
Somebody's crunching on ice.
I just wanted to say that I only came to the meeting today because I was hoping that Biscuit would make another appearance, so I'm waiting on that with bated breath.
Oh, Timothy, where's Biscuit?
Hey, Kristen Leichner, thank you so much for the donation to GNC from Pride. We truly appreciate it.
You're welcome. I'm glad we were able to support you guys this year.
It was awesome.
Tim, where's Biscuit? Kristen Leichner only came to the meeting to see Biscuit.
Let me go get her.
We'll wait a couple quick more minutes. We'll get going. Thanks for your patience for our guests. Our work session ran a little long.
Biscuit. There's Biscuit. But...
Thank you. That was totally worth it.
She's getting a little more color in her fur.
Yes. Oh, okay. I'll let you go.
Oh, we have another dog. Uh-oh, competing dogs.
Oh.
This is Peanut the dog.
Peanut the dog.
Excellent.
I'm going to go get one of my boa constrictors now.
No thanks.
What's scary is I believe that you would own one.
Oh, yes. You haven't seen his?
I own two.
You have two?
Two, yeah.
Are we talking about snakes?
Yes.
Ugh.
Right. Okay, are we all here?
We are.
Okay. Ready, Brad? Ready, Sylvia?
Yes, we're ready.
Awesome. I'd like to call to order our regular city council meeting for Tuesday, December 15th, 2020. Would everyone please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice
for all.
I heard like one of you.
I heard everyone. It was just like individual clips of everyone one at a time.
I just realized I was muted.
All right. Roll call, Sylvia?
And Mayor Mays,
Here.
Council President Rosner,
Here.
Councilor Browse,
Here.
Councilor Garland,
Here.
Councilor Young,
Here.
Councilor Griffin,
Here.
and Councilor Stott.
I'm here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. Next on our agenda is approval of the agenda.
I make
I
a
move-
motion that we approve the agenda.
Second.
Made by Russell, seconded by Renee. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Awesome. Next is the consent agenda. We have 6 items on our consent agenda this evening. First, item A, approval of the November 24th, 2020 City Council meeting minutes. Item B is approval of the December 1st, 2020 City Council meeting minutes. Item C is Resolution 2020-090, approving an intergovernmental agreement between Washington County and the City of Sherwood to fund implementation of City of Sherwood Emergency Small Business Grant Program due to Governor Brown's statewide 2-week freeze. Item D is Resolution 2020-091, authorizing an intergovernmental agreement between Washington County and the City of Sherwood for public mental health and community psych program. Item E is Resolution 2020-092, approving intergovernmental agreement amendment number 1 between Washington County and the City of Sherwood for Cities and Special District Assistance Program. And item F is Resolution 2020-093, approving an intergovernmental agreement for the collection of local recreational marijuana taxes.
I move consent.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion on the motion. Hearing none, all in favor of approving the consent agenda as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on, citizen comments. Sylvia, do we have any citizen comments this evening?
Yes, Mayor, we did receive a letter earlier this week, which I forwarded to the council from Neil Shannon. So I have that letter and it will be included into the record.
Thank you very much. Is there a desire by council to read it into the record?
I think we typically have been, so it's probably good for the record.
Sylvia, do you have it handy?
I do.
Awesome. Could you read it for me? Read it for us? And I think it can be done in 4 minutes.
I'll read fast. This letter again from Neil Shannon, a resident, to the City of Sherwood Parks Board, Planning Commission, and members of the City Council. The Brookman Road area has recently been under review and minor changes have been proposed to the concept plan to clarify the character and alignment of Brookman Road. While I support those improvements, I also wanted to make sure that the other goals for the area are considered and provided, particularly regarding parks and walking paths connecting to and complementing current city assets. I will admit that I have a dog in the fight as I live very close to the northern edge of the Brookman expansion zone, but that can be an advantage as I am familiar with the resources and neighborhood. It says attitudes, but I believe it's attributes that will be strongly affected as the changes move forward. 12 years ago, when the concept plan was finalized, the citizens of Sherwood stepped forward to help design and plan a plan that would fit the character of Sherwood then and now. To quote and approve the concept plan, quote, development of Brookman Addition must be balanced with the preservation of key elements of the natural environment, unquote. Key to that preservation are the goals to designate and reserve areas for concept plan for parks and open space, including the goal to, end quote, identify, define, and map protected zones for lands deserving of protection, but which are not yet protected from development, with development rights transferable to a developable zone, unquote. I understand that the city is currently working on an update to the Parks Master Plan, and it is my hope that future developments in the Brookman area expansion area are not excluded from that plan. As the concept plan notes, quotes, natural features of the plan area include significant pockets of forest habitat centrally located between Goose Creek and Cedar Creek. Cedar Creek is unnamed Cedar Creek, its unnamed attributes, and their associated riparian areas possess extensive trees and shrub coverage and appear to provide high-value wildlife habitat according to Metro inventories, unquote. It is my hope that much of this inventory will be preserved to create an urban retreat of forested lands and trails that connect to the existing Sherwood trail system, especially the trails along Cedar Creek and Redfern Drive. In addition, while the road connections to Redfern Drive are restricted to pedestrian and emergency traffic only, these trail systems can provide the connection to Redfern and pedestrian traffic for the new neighborhoods to Archer Glen School and onto the downtown Sherwood. Neil Shannon.
Thank you, Sylvia. Again, if for those that are watching live or delayed on tape, we certainly love to hear from our community, and we just ask that you, while we're in this pandemic, submit comments 24 hours in advance or greater. Email them in, and we will include them. Thank you very much. Next item on our agenda is new business. It's just one item under new business, resolution 2020-084, opposing the proposed tipping fee and regional system fee increase by Metro. Joe?
So Mayor and Council, I will introduce this and update everyone and then turn it over to the mayor to lead a discussion, obviously, with the council. But this is an item that's been tabled over the last month. We've been following this closely. A number of the city councilors, Mayor Mays and Council President Rosner especially, have been following and engaged with our partners at Metro about this proposal. It has also evolved over time. The original proposal, as you may recall, was to implement a tipping fee increase approximately January 1st of 2021, and then also do another tipping fee increase on July 1st, 2021. Metro rolled that proposal out to various stakeholders, industry folks, and local governments. Got a lot of feedback and pushback on that original concept. They've altered their proposal now, and the preferred option is what they are calling option 2, which would not have 2 increases in 2021, but only have 1 increase effective July 1st, 2021. That increase would be approximately about $15 a ton. That's a 15% increase, which is fairly significant, which I think is one of the reasons of a number that this resolution has been drafted. This resolution was crafted through a combination of efforts. Josh Soper, the city attorney, myself, and Council President Rosner worked on this proposed resolution together for your consideration tonight. Metro Council will be, it appears, acting on this question this Thursday. That's what we've been told by Metro officials. So I would anticipate if the council wants to take action, tonight would be the night to send a message to our Metro partners about your feelings about this increase. As the past 2 meetings, Pride Disposal officials are on the call if you have any specific questions about the impacts of this proposal. And then also Chris Bell, our financial analyst that analyzes solid waste and recycling costs, are also on this call as well to answer any questions. So with that quick introduction, Mr. Mayor, unless you have questions for me, I'll let you take it from here.
Thanks, Joe. I will assume everyone has read the proposed resolution, and we certainly had the work session to kind of go over the potential of something. And concerns we got, and feedback and representations I think that we got. And my perspective is I don't think that they're living up to what at least staff represented that they were going to do between now and any proposed increase in July. I'm glad that they're definitely going to delay until July, but in our work session, all I glaringly remember was you can't rely on their rate model because it wasn't any good. That's how I refer to it, but they said something else. So what did they change to the rate model to make it actually viable now? And they had also said they were going to engage stakeholders, and they haven't yet. So, thoughts, comments, questions? Anybody's hand up? I don't see anybody's hand up. Tim, you're muted.
I'm
You're
now.
on mute, Tim.
I was just talking to myself there. So I've had several conversations with Metro, and kind of where this has evolved since the last meeting is, and I do appreciate them. And it looks like from their work session, they're leaning toward option 2, which is not having the rate increases go into effect until July. But what they're planning, the resolution that's on the table for the Metro Council meeting Thursday night, is to actually authorize those increases, but not to take effect till July. And I think our position at this point, if you read the resolution that's on the table here, is what's the rush? You know, they can wait and do the normal rate process review that they do during their budget cycle, see what happens between now and then. That also gives them a lot of time to engage with cities like us to talk about not just the structure of the rates that they're proposing, but other opportunities to solve, you know, the budget hole that they're facing right now. So I think it's my thought here is, why do they have to authorize this now? Let's take some time, take a breath, put together a working group of haulers and cities to talk about this and see what kind of creative solutions we can come up with. Because right now they're proposing a 36% increase in the regional system fees, and that's huge. That's historic. That's a big increase, and to do that with just going through their standard rate review process with their standard models, as Keith talked about, I don't think is appropriate at this point in time.
Yeah, well said. Other questions, comments?
I guess I would just echo some of what Tim has said is, you know, clearly this is a complicated issue. It's not something that, you know, we can in the next 2 minutes explain, but, you know, we have gone through it. We've talked to them about it. We've listened to what they had to say. And I think the biggest thing, and when I'm making decisions currently right now for anything, is the pandemic and the impacts on our citizens is at the top of my head. And right now, a potential rate increase right now is not the answer. I know that there's downstream effects, but I'm just not on board with this at this time.
Thanks, Sean. Other comments, questions, or motion?
I make a motion to accept resolution 2020-084, opposing the proposed tipping fee increase by Metro.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion on the motion. Hearing none, all in favor of approving resolution 2020-084, opposing the proposed tipping fee and regional system fee increase by Metro, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, council. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Next, we have a public hearing on our two public hearings on our agenda. Sylvia, you're muted, Sylvia.
There we go.
There you go.
All right, perfect. So the Sherwood City Council will hold public hearings this evening to hear testimony on 2 agenda items. Ordinance 2020-012, approving a 41-lot planned unit development to be known as the Denali Summit Planned Unit Development. This is the first reading on this item. And ordinance 2020-013, amending chapters 3.25 and 5.30 of the Sherwood Municipal Code relating to marijuana taxes and businesses and declaring an emergency. This is also a first reading on this ordinance. The public hearing this evening will be conducted as follows. Staff will present a staff report. Questions, if any, by the City Council for staff. We will receive any written testimony, and at this time, Mayor and Council, the city has not received any testimony for either one of these items.
Okay.
We will then close the public hearing. No other comments will be received. Again, this is the first hearing before the City Council on these items. Generally, the council will hold 2 hearings prior to making a decision. A second hearing on these items is currently scheduled for January the 5th. However, in accordance with the city charter, the council reserves the right to make a decision at the close of this hearing by unanimous vote of all sitting council members. That concludes my statement.
Thank you, Sylvia. Ordinance 2020-0112, approving 41 lot PUD. Eric.
Good evening, Mayor Mays and City Council. I will share the screen with you.
Hey, Eric,
Not quite
your
sure
volume
what's
is
going
pretty
on,
low.
Eric, but you're really, really quiet.
Is that better?
No.
It's weird. It's only an issue with council. His volume is not a problem with planning commission. So I don't know why that would only be a council meeting thing.
Let me, I'm going to join on my phone. One sec.
Is there a volume? You need to mute one of them.
Mute the version on your computer.
Hold on one sec. Sorry. Whew, there we go. Okay, sorry about that. So hopefully everyone can hear me now on my phone, and I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint and share my screen. Sorry about that.
Yep, I can hear you a lot better. That's good.
Okay, if there's any other IT issues, please let me know. So good evening again, Mayor Mays and City Council. Happy to be with you and giving this presentation on LU 2020-013 Denali Summit. The applicant is proposing a 41-lot single-family residential subdivision and planned unit development in the very low-density residential zone. PUD applications are processed as a Type 5 land use action pursuant to the Sherwood Development Code. The Type 5 hearing authority is City Council, and the appeal authority is the Land Use Board of Appeals. The application material is here for anyone watching at home. Here's an overview of the application process. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on the application on November 10th, 2020. The Commission recommended approval of the application subject to the findings and conditions in the staff report, with the addition of one condition of approval related to open space, and I'll go over that shortly. Since the Planning Commission recommendation, the applicant has submitted a conceptual open space plan, a revised plat, and a revised plat for consideration by City Council. One public comment was also received that was not included in the Planning Commission record because it was received after the deadline. Again, I will go over all 3 of those sort of changes during this presentation tonight. Tonight is the first reading on the application, and the second hearing is scheduled for January 5th, 2020. Notice of the application was routed to affected agencies on September 30th, 2020, and agency comments have been incorporated into the findings and exhibits of the staff report. Public notice of the application was also provided in accordance with section 16.72020 of the Development Code, including mailed notice to property owners within 1,000 feet of the site. Again, one public comment was received, and I'll summarize that at the end of the presentation. Here's the applicable sections of the Development Code for reference. As a reminder, the decision is required to be made based off of the approval criteria. The development site is shown here, outlined in red. So it's east of Murdoch Road and north of Ironwood Lane. This purple boundary here is the current city boundary. So it's on the east side of city limits. Existing conditions. The development site contains 3 parcels containing approximately 15 acres. 2 of the properties contain a single family home, which are proposed to remain. There's one here and one here. The site has an undulating topography that is vegetated with trees, shrubs, and grass fields. Based off the latest data from Metro Maps, the site does not contain any wetlands or a 100-year floodplain. The Rock Creek floodplain is located east of the site. This is kind of sits up on a hill or plateau, and then the topography slopes down as you enter the Rock Creek corridor to the east of the site. The development site was historically part of the 40-acre Ken Foster farm and has contaminated soils, as the farm was used for discarding animal hides and carcasses from the local tannery. The applicant is responsible for cleanup of the soils as part of the development and is actively working with DEQ on that process. The applicant is conditioned to submit a no further action confirmation from DEQ prior to the city accepting the public improvements. The development site is bound by private property in all directions, with the exception of Ironwood Lane here to the south. In terms of previous approvals in the surrounding area, Ironwood Acres was approved as a subdivision for 4 lots. Denali Lane was approved as a PUD under the same criteria you're considering tonight for 7 lots. And most recently, Denali Meadows was approved for 13 lots under the PUD approval process within the Southeast Sherwood Master Plan. So a few examples of nearby developments under the same density and approval criteria. This property to the north is currently undeveloped with the exception of the single family home. It's a 12.4 acre site. The public street that is proposed for this application would run, roughly north, south to north here and be stubbed at this north property line, and then would be continued once this property redevelops and connect to Upper Roy Street. And I'll have a conceptual street plan here in a few slides. Here's an overview of the preferred alternative that was part of the Southeast Sherwood Master Plan. That's alternative BC. The development site that you're considering tonight is shown here. It's outlined in red, so it does, encompass a fairly significant portion of the Southeast Sherwood Master Plan area. And the Southeast Sherwood Master Plan was developed in 2006 and is intended to serve as a guide to coordinating separate land use actions and infrastructure investments in this planning area.
Eric,
the plan assumed.
Eric.
The plan is.
Eric.
The plan is. Sorry,
Eric?
someone talking?
Yep. Eric, this is Keith.
Good.
Just for clarity, the city council never adopted the Southeast Master Plan.
Sorry, I just put you on speakerphone. I think what you asked is, has the city council adopted the Southeast Sherwood Master Plan?
I'm being clear that it was never adopted, so it is difficult to reference it.
Yes, thank you. So I will,
in any way.
The Southeast Sherwood Master Plan was the sort of
Never
formal
adopted.
actions that the city took on it was adopted by resolution by the Planning Commission, 2006.
They don't have resolutions on the Planning Commission.
Okay, perhaps this was with City Council. I'll have to check. I think that was in a
It was
previous.
not adopted by.
I think Mayor Mays, it was the
Driving
only
point home
resolution
that this
the
was not
planning-
approved by City Council ever, or adopted by City Council ever. Okay.
So this is Julia, just for clarification. It was the only planning commission that I'm aware of that planning commission ever adopted was for the Southeast Sherwood Master Plan many years ago. So there was a resolution, but it's the only one that's.
It was a recommendation. They made a recommendation to city council. They have the ability. They don't have that authority to do something else.
This is Josh, and just one other clarification that actually confuses the matter further. City council never actually adopted or approved the Southeast Sherwood Master Plan, as the mayor said. The council did, however, approve an ordinance that is adopted into the land use code that references conforming to the Southeast Sherwood Master Plan. And so that's why we have to talk about it.
Yes, as Josh mentioned, in 2013, the city approved a text amendment to the VLDR, very low density residential zone, via ordinance 2013-013, that allows up to 4 units per acre if the development meets the PUD approval criteria, so the general approval criteria for PUDs, and also generally conforms to the Southeast Sherwood Master Plan. That is the language in the development code in the VLDR zone. The applicant is proposing development under this code section with a final net density of 3.3 units per acre. And I think this slide helps clarify things a little bit as well. So within the very low density residential zone, which this property is zoned, including all of the land or properties within the Southeast Sherwood Master Plan, have the underlying VLDR zoning. If an applicant came in just under that zoning, the density is 0.7 to 1. The code then allows, if approved as part of the PUD, a residential development could be granted between 1.4 and 2 units per acre. And then if there's a PUD that also conforms to the Southeast Sherwood Master Plan, the development code currently allows up to 4 units per acre. And again, the applicant is proposing 3.34 units per acre, which would put them in this highest tier category.
And for reference sake, the 2 other PUDs that have already been approved in this area, what was the density of those?
I don't have it off the top of my head, but we can certainly get that for you. My understanding is that it was under this sort of highest threshold. I believe the question, of course, would be, was it above 2? And in the staff report and in the findings, was it complying with the Southeast Sherwood Master Plan in order to get up to 4? I believe for both of these,
I'm sure it's compliant. I just, for me, it's more about a comparison, right? If this is at 3.3 and the other ones are at 2.7, then sorry, it sounds like somebody has an answer.
All of them have been below density. In the Denali one, you could have gotten to approximately 9
So
units.
Steve, you're
We're at 7. We could have got to 16, and we're at 13 in the other one. So they're all below max density. They're all about the same.
Steve, you can't talk. Just to be clear. Thanks.
Staff can certainly look. That'd just be a pretty quick check on the other staff reports to see what those final densities came in at.
Thank you.
Yeah, we can definitely get that for you tonight. But yeah, appreciate the questions on this. I think they're important. All right, so that's kind of the background, and to get into an actual overview of what's being proposed, again, 41 lots. The lots are shown here in yellow, open space shown in green in 3 different areas. Here at the corner, a stormwater facility. In terms of public infrastructure, the new primary street will run off of Ironwood Lane, come through and be stubbed as near the north property line. I did want to clarify and give some background on the design of this road, because it does make a pretty strong curve here. Originally, when this development came in, it only included this property here on the east and not this middle property. And the road was proposed to come in where this stormwater tract is. And the city let the applicant know that because these driveways are here, there's 3 driveways that come down from one of the previous developments that come in right around here. The intersection spacing between the driveways and this new public street was too close. And so the developer can speak to this better, but my understanding is that then this property came into play in order for all of this to be developed together and help alleviate the constraint that was coming up here when just this property was into play. And so the proposed location off Ironwood Lane is in response to concerns from the city regarding the proximity to these intersections, locations with the driveway. Since the Planning Commission hearing, the applicant has provided a revised plat that reorients lots 3 and 4 to take access from access from Tract E. So here's the original plat. Both of them face the public street. Under the revised plat, they will both now face Tract E. The reason for that change is because the city would like, and it would be best if this public street stopped a little bit short or as short as possible from the north property line in order to reduce the amount of fill in this area. And that would allow just easier development and transition as the development moves north. With this orientation, a driveway would have to be off of here, and also the utilities would have to come into the roadway here. Under this orientation, the access and utilities can come in here and require less infrastructure in this immediate area, which is the reason for the change. As part of the PUD approval, the applicant is requesting an exception to certain development standards as shown in this table. The applicant's narrative states that due to the physical conditions on the site, the developer would like to have flexibility in home placement in order to avoid grading and site disturbance in areas that have constraints for building. Those constraints primarily being the bedrock, hard bedrock that's there, and also the topography. This is the approval criteria for planned unit developments. I won't go over all of them, but just to state that in order to get the exceptions to the underlying zoning standards, the development would need to show compliance with all of these standards. The applicant has submitted 2 architectural pattern books that provide details on the building design and material. The housing types are compatible with surrounding residential developments, including Denali Meadows and Denali Lane. Sherwood's development code requires 1 off-street parking space per dwelling unit for single-family residences, and the applicant is proposing a minimum of 1 one off-street parking space located on the driveway of each property. One of the approval criteria for the PUDs on the slide I showed earlier is that PUDs are required to dedicate 15% of the buildable portion of the site as open space. The applicant is proposing 3 open space tracts totaling 1.84 acres within tracts A, C, and G, which equates to 14.98% of the buildable portion of the site. Less than 15% can be approved if the development is located within close proximity to existing public spaces that, when combined with the proposed open space, meet or exceed community needs. The staff report explains that in the other two PUDs, approximately 12,000 square feet of additional open space above the 15% was provided. And when taken together, all 3 of the developments provide in excess of 15% open space and therefore meet or exceed the community needs.
Eric, I have a question on that.
Yes, Council President Rosner. Yeah.
Thank you. So track C, and I see you're going to get to it. That's pretty steep hillside there, or is that fairly level?
There is a slope there, as I mentioned. Yeah, it goes down to Rock Creek there, and there is. We may be able to pull up a grading plan. I don't think I have one in this presentation, but it does start to slope down towards Rock Creek there. And this is a conceptual open space plan that was submitted by the applicant after the Planning Commission hearing. So the only condition Planning Commission added was regarding providing additional details on the open space plan. And so this is in response to that, and it does provide a little bit more detail about what is proposed and also what's feasible. I think what you're getting to on this in this area is, what's feasible. I did confirm with the applicant that, this design right here, even with the slopes, is feasible. So of course the pathway would stay, roughly on top of the grade, and then it would slope down. This is a lawn area shown in green. These are benches in here, one bench there, so a few benches along the pathway, and this would be a native area. The other consideration for this tract is that the soil remediation stockpiles may end up here and then be capped in this location. So it is serving dual purposes. But again, just to go back to this conceptual open space plan, it was submitted in response to the condition. It does include the adjacent Denali Meadows open space, and so the idea was to provide sort of the complete picture of open space between at least these two developments. And so this area here is sort of split between the two. So this is open space for Denali Meadows. This is open space for Denali Summit. And the idea is that you have a continuous sort of pathway from Murdoch. You can come into the site and eventually come all the way to this sort of vantage point on the east side of the property. Just a little bit more detail there, a little bit higher resolution. You can kind of see that trees, benches, pathway, a lawn area is proposed for that open space. And then because there was so much discussion at the Planning Commission as well, just wanted to provide a little bit of context, I guess, for the amount of open space and park space provided relative to our standards and level of service and the comprehensive plan. And so this is what open space is proposed between the three developments, Denali Summit, this one, of course, being the largest with 1.83 acres. And the others, which total 3 acres total for 61 single-family lots between the three developments. In terms of level of service for providing parks, we would provide this 3 acres is about the size of a neighborhood park. These are different because one is open space, one is park. But in terms of the amount of space provided, it provides a comparison point. And the neighborhood park would be intended to serve approximately, over 500 people, 1 acre to 500. So you would just scale that up for 2 to 5 acres. So,
Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, though. We're comparing the open space to a park. So in terms of like acres per people, and I don't know, it seems like a apples to oranges comparison, because with that hillside and the slopes and everything, it's nice to look at, but it's not usable as a park for the most part.
And, I don't believe there's any amenities other than benches and path, right? There's no structures or picnic tables or anything like that. Is that accurate?
That's correct. So the proposed amenities right now would be shown in this conceptual plan. It seems like this is, I think that'd be a question for the applicant if this is, firm, or if they are considering more. But at this point, yes, no sort of play structure, gazebo, that type of thing. It really is intended to be open space. I appreciate that comment.
And when they present, I guess they could speak to that, not just in relation to this PUD, but in the 3 total. You're using the 3 combined open spaces, but if there's any amenities beyond benches in any of those 3, that would be worth knowing about. But I'll let them speak to that when their time comes.
Absolutely. And Council President Rosener, I appreciate the distinction there, and I think it is an important distinction that open space is not a park, and as you can see, I think the nature of them is a little bit different, with providing areas that you might really linger at versus more of an active open space. I think the intent was really getting down to the number of people served and the size provided for the neighborhood. So the amount of open space relative to the number of units or number of people served.
And just to do the math, 61 single family lots of this size in Sherwood is probably somewhere between 250 and 300 people, just from a reference standpoint. But obviously we have no idea what it will actually be, but.
Correct. Yep. Thank you for that. Single-family subdivisions are required to provide a 40% tree canopy over the net development site. They can meet this requirement through preserving existing trees, planting new trees, or through street trees. For this site, 40% would equate to 182,000 square feet of tree canopy. The application is conditioned to show that 40% prior to final development plan approval. Staff is also, or Planning Commission has recommended 2 additional conditions of approval that the applicant inventory and then protect all of the trees that are within the designated open space areas. And so it'd likely potentially be one in Tract A prior to the road being installed, Tract G, and then any of these on the very eastern boundary within Tract C. Transportation facilities, I kind of already went through it a little bit, just to sort of clarify, what's actually proposed. Again, 1 large single public street, 3 private street tracks. In terms of how many lots each will serve, the current proposal with the revised plat is 28 lots to be served by public streets and 13 lots to be served by the private streets.
Eric, another question. So what's the width of the usable road, and will there be parking on both sides of the road?
Let's see, I believe this is going to be just our standard residential street. And we do have our city engineer on the line as well. But let me see if I can zoom in here and see what the width is. So it's 52-foot right of way. And off the top of my head, I'm not clear on parking for that standard local residential street, but we can certainly get an answer for you there. But it's a standard local residential street.
I just found the cross section on sheet 8 of 17 of the foldouts, and it looks like the actual street is only 24 feet.
Are you talking, sorry, public street or private street?
I'm talking about the street you were just outlining that kind of makes the S-turn.
Yep.
Yes.
This one is 52. It's a public street, so it would be 52 feet wide is the right of way, proposed right of way.
About 52 feet of asphalt.
So the cross section.
No, it's not. It's not that.
Eric,
so sheet 8 of 17.
Right, Bob, Galati's on the line.
Yeah.
okay, so I'm looking at their submittal set. Their cross section shows a 52-foot right-of-way with a 28-foot paved width, which is curb face to curb face.
And at 28 feet, is that parking on one side?
That would be parking on one side. So we will have to go through and basically designate which side of the street gets no parking.
Thanks, Bob.
Okay.
All right, moving right along. So here is the neighborhood circulation map that shows how potentially the road could be completed through this property to the north. So again, stepped here, then curving around and eventually connecting here to Upper Roy Street. Denali Meadows has a new public street off of Ironwood Lane as well, and that would also come in and connect to this street that loops around. Of course, the developer is required to provide sanitary sewer and water supply service in conformance with our engineering standards. In addition, stormwater, surface water would need to be managed in compliance with CWS and city engineering standards. Again, a stormwater facility is proposed here at the south corner of the site. We did receive one public comment. It came in just before the Planning Commission hearing, and so wasn't included in the record for Planning Commission, but we would, of course, like to include it here for City Council. It was a short comment, so I'll just read it in full. Today, November 10th, 2020, I spoke with Eric regarding my concern that this new development will obstruct our current panoramic view from our property at 14875 Southwest Division Street, Sherwood, Oregon. We are unable to picture the outcome of the proposed new construction. Just to clarify, I did look up the address. It's on the west side of Murdoch Road. And so based off of the comment, there really isn't an approval criteria, that it would be applied to. There are standards related to view corridors within the Southeast Sherwood Master Plan, but since this property and vantage point is outside of the planning area, the standard development code does not contain any language regarding obstructing views.
I will say just if I can, I actually drove up to that address to see for myself what I thought of that. And again, this is my just own personal opinion here. And as you said, there isn't necessarily any governing criteria, but the location on Division to me appears to be substantially higher in elevation than the building area we're talking about. I'm not saying that won't change their view. I'm not saying they're wrong to have concerns, but that was my observation anyway, as a layperson.
Thanks, Doug.
Yes, thank you, Councilor Scott. And I, of course, I talked to this individual, and I think, the main thing that they were expressing is that they weren't really able to picture the outcome. They weren't quite sure exactly what the impact would be. I haven't heard from them after that. We did point them in the direction of the plans. Yeah, appreciate the comment when it did come in. For tonight's City Council alternatives, staff has a few alternatives for Council to consider. The first would be to approve the application based on the Planning Commission findings and conditions as modified by the revised plat. The City Council could modify the Planning Commission findings and approve the application with conditions as modified by the revised plat. Or the City Council could modify the Planning Commission findings and deny the application. Of course, we have another hearing scheduled for January 5th as well, and that concludes the staff presentation.
Thanks, Eric. So before we go to questions, we'll get the presentation from the applicant. First, Josh, do we need to ask everybody for ex parte contact now or later?
We typically do that at the beginning of this process, so now would be a great time for anyone to disclose that.
And ex parte contact refers to not chatting with staff, but does chatting with planning commissioner or commissioners count as ex parte contact?
That would be a potential ex parte contact. It would be worth disclosing.
So I spoke with Planning Commission Chair Jean after they heard this, expressing concerns about the process that they went through, the staff presentation, the concerns of the training of PC members on PUDs, and in short asked if we, as a city council, would, if at all possible, send it back to them to chew on some more. So anyways, I had that contact. Anyone else? Great, no other ex parte contact. So Steve, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, City Councilors, for your time tonight. We appreciate the opportunity to present this project to you. And I also would like to thank staff for the detailed presentation, as well as the time with the Planning Commission. I guess I was a little surprised to hear your comments, Mr. Mayor, because we did spend about 3 hours with the Planning Commission on the project, talking about a range of issues, and I thought it was a really good discussion. So, but I do thank them for their recommendation of approval and the comments that they provided in the recommendation. I think I'll just touch on a few things. I know there's a lot of questions that you have, and I think maybe that's where my time will be better spent, is answering your questions. But I would like to note that the revised plat that Eric showed there of lots 3 and 4 came at the request of your city engineering division, because that street was going to terminate very high on the topography there, and there was going to be about a 20 to 25 foot tall retaining wall required to hold that street up. And so they asked us if we could pull the street back, dedicate the right of way all the way to the property boundary, so we could eliminate that retaining wall. And so as a result of that request, we thought it was a great idea. we reoriented lots 3 and 4 from the original proposal. So I just wanted to make sure you guys understood kind of that conversation that got us to that point. And it was the city staff's concern about the large retaining wall that was going to be needed at the property boundary.
For you, for not building the rest of the road, are you paying the city some amount of money?
It's my understanding that that'll be resolved with the development of the property to the north. They will come in and extend the street from where we terminate it onto their property. That's why we're dedicating the right of way to that point. And then that's essentially the stub of the street, from what I understand with the city engineer. And then when that property to the north redevelops, they will be able to extend the street from that point, similar to if we just brought it to the property boundary. So that's why we're extending the right of way all the way there, so they have that access. In terms, there was a question about the density of all these projects, and I can let you know that all of them have been developed below max density. Like I was saying, and I apologize for speaking out of turn there. I was just trying to help. But the Denali subdivision could have gotten 9 units, and it's 7. The Denali Meadows project could have gotten as many as 16. It's at 13. And this one, I believe, is at 41. And I believe the max density was closer to 46. And to be honest with you, it's very hard to get to max density on really any land development project due to right-of-way dedications and water quality facilities and other amenities that are required for the development of these projects. And so once you start subtracting that from your gross acreage, density is based on net. Your net gets down to a number that's very hard to reach the max. So just trying to help you understand that a little bit. You know, I think we have done a good job on trying to, and I appreciate the mayor bringing up the Sherwood master planning process and kind of how that worked to give some people some background. But as he noted, it was never adopted by city council. But what did happen is the VDL, the very low density residential zone, and the reference to the BC alternative is kind of a guiding document to try and facilitate the vision that came from that effort. And, you know, as staff indicated, one of the things that was very challenging to me on that master plan was, pardon? One of the things that was challenging to me is you couldn't extend Denali Lane in the fashion that they showed it in your master plan because of those driveways that serve those 4 lots to the east. So that right there created a change in how the road was going to have to be designed. And once we found that out, we were fortunate enough to get the neighboring property to the west, the Brad Miller's property, to join us in this project so we could make this work. Because without his property, we could not develop the Uzon property. And so we're very grateful that he was agreeable to joining us. And I think we have a better project as a result. The other thing that I don't think that Sherwood Master Plan envisioned was these properties being taken down individually. It seems to anticipate all this land being acquired and developed as one. And so when that's not happening, what you get is all 3 of the existing homes on these properties between Denali Meadows and the 2 that we're working on today, the homes have been retained. And those home sites that are retained are actually in some of the areas that are identified as open space on the master plan. And so one was right in the middle where the Miller home sits, and that was identified as being a view corridor. What we did, we recognized the view corridor as being an important aspect to this area. We moved it to track C, so we could also include kind of an additional buffer to Rock Creek. So now people can come down and enjoy that natural area, have great views of Mount Hood, see the wildlife that interacts down there along the Rock Creek corridor. And it just seemed like a better location for the open space. As you indicated, there is some slope there. There's a lot of grading, and this is a very rocky site, so there is going to be a lot of earth removal, and we are going to use that site to locate some of our haul off, so we can make that slope a little less dramatic and enhance it for an open space area. So I think you'll see some tapering at the south end where we're showing the lawn and make that a little bit of a transition area and then into a more natural area. And then like the BC alternative master plan showed, we are extending the trail through that track so it can be extended into the property to the north as envisioned in that master plan. So they can hopefully back up the open space in that project to this open space and create a very nice buffer along the Rock Creek corridor there to continue to protect that area and show it off really for the people that live here. And if you look at the BC alternative for that property to the north, it showed a large grove of trees being preserved as the open space. Well, those trees are no longer there. So I don't think that that's really an issue any longer, that the open space be where that tree grove is, and maybe it will match where we have this open space now. So we try to get these open spaces put in areas where they could connect with one another to create some larger spaces, similar to how we did it with the open space tract in the Denali Meadows, and then tract A in this project, how we back them up to one another. You create a larger open space, we get the walking trails going through the project. We now have a looping trail, if you will, that you can walk through this entire site and come all the way back to Murdoch Road without having to be on residential streets for a very long time. You're in open space areas. And so we thought that was a really nice feature and unique to this area. We are providing the benches, we're providing the grass. I appreciate Eric showing you that slide that kind of said, you know, here's what we kind of see a park serving the neighborhood as, you know, this much area for 500 people. We've got about that much area to serve, as the city council member recommended, about 160 people maybe, you know, 3 people per home or so in this area. So 3 or 4, you know, hard to say what the, you know, what it will be, but we think that, you know, we're in that range. You know, we're less than 500, probably more than 150, but, you know, I mean, it seems to be a reasonable amount of open space that is above the percentage for the entire area. We're above the 15% for the entire area. So we think that we've done a good job of trying to implement the master plan, bring in the objectives that it identified as being important for this area. And then, you know, lastly, as you all know, this is area that was used for tanning animal hides, and there was a lot of contaminated soils, and there's been a big effort by the developers here to get that dirt out of there, do it to DEQ standards, and make sure that this is now safe for people to come into. And so I think that's an effort to be you know, commended really, because it is not easy working with DEQ, and it's very expensive to do these type of projects. So it's a very significant benefit for this area to have this land developed and have that dirt removed. You know, I think at this point, and I would also like to note the proximity to the neighborhood parks that are in this area. Just less than a few blocks away, you have the Murdoch City Park to the northwest. And then at the southwest, you have the Snyder Park and the Sherwood Dog Park. And all of those are within walking distance of this property. So the combination of the open space for the residents here, the existing parks, there seems to be a comprehensive network of usable spaces in the east area or the southeast area of Sherwood to kind of complement and balance each other. So with that, I will stop and I will take your questions. And Eric, if I could ask you to maybe pull up that landscape plan so we have a map to reference, that would be fantastic. I think that would give us a resource to bounce our comments off of.
Sylvia, Sylvia, we don't have any public comment on this PUD, correct?
Mayor, I did not receive any, no.
Thanks. Eric, could you remind council what's the 120-day deadline date for this application?
Yes, Mayor Mays, January 26th is the 120-day deadline.
Thanks. Doug, your hand's up. You're muted. Doug, you're muted.
All right, apologies. I have 4 questions for the applicant, so I'll just fire away if that's okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. The first one is, I guess, more of an observation to me, but the 2 private streets / driveways that serve more than one house, that kind of go like this and seem to almost connect, but not quite.
Track enough.
It looks, to me, it looks like we should just make that a road. because, and I understand why you don't, but it's just an observation to me. It seems like in the long-term benefit of that community, that is an odd configuration, but no, not a question. The next three things actually are questions, though. In regards to the open space plan, specifically on tract, I believe it's C, that's along the creek. You know, who was responsible for maintaining it would be part A of that question. And then, you know, the second thing is how accessible is it? I mean, it seems like it has two pathways that kind of go in between houses. You know, if the public were to come there, there's no parking available. It doesn't, you know, it feels like it's pretty tucked back in there, hard to see, hard to even know it's there. Maybe limited accessibility from the public. I'll let you touch on that, and then I'll get to my next two questions.
Yeah. Regarding the first one, in terms of
maintenance.
Maintenance, thank you. I was trying to remember what that was. As it's proposed right now, this is a homeowner maintained open space area like the rest of them. So all these Denali projects are one, if you will. They're all going to have access to these areas. So it's not intended really to be for the entire public, like a public park. It's open space to the residents of the subdivision that they're paying HOA fees for to maintain. So similar to like any other PUD that has open space that's maintained by an HOA, the thought is that that open space would be used by the residents that are part of that subdivision, because it's really their space since they own it and they maintain it. With that being said, the other option is to dedicate it to the city and create more of a park, if you will, and have the city maintain those amenities and the space for all to enjoy. And so you probably heard that was a conversation that we had with the Planning Commission. They were talking about parking, but that's not how the open space is intended to be used as a destination, like the Murdoch City Park or like the Snyder Park. Those serve that benefit, or if you will, for the city.
Sure.
So
sure.
but with that being said, we're not gonna preclude people from coming through here. You know, they'll have every ability to walk through here and use that space, but it's not supposed to be utilized like a park. In terms of the usefulness of the space, we believe we're going to have lower fencing up along the front, so it won't be 6 feet tall. I believe the code requires it to be about 3.5 feet tall back to a certain distance before you can transition up to a higher fence. So there should be some good visibility back into that space through these open space areas that we're connecting to the street. And then once you get into that area, we do want to make it a space that people can relax in, like we indicated, and enjoy the beautiful scenery that's going to be on that side of the project. They're going to have a line of sight to Mount Hood that's going to be unobstructed, and they'll be able to take advantage of enjoying that natural area down there that's already been preserved. So it seemed to be a great location for the open space.
Thank you very much. Question number two. There's a number of code setback requirements that you guys have requested relaxation on as part of the PUD process. I think the majority of those are internal to the project itself. The ones I'm asking about are on lots 11 and 12, where you've asked for a setback reduction along the property line that abuts the existing existing lot over there. I think there's a couple of houses over there, one of them particularly fairly close to that property line itself. And, during the Planning Commission hearing, I was actually surprised that this didn't get discussed more, because that's typically something that the PC has more concern about. But maybe you could just speak a little bit about, you're putting an encumbrance essentially on a neighbor the outside of this PUD, and that's generally a high bar to me, so I'm concerned about that one. So if you could touch on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Eric, if you could go to that existing condition map that you pulled up early in your presentation, I think that would give us some help on kind of showing you the impact. There you go. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
as you can see, there's a row of conifer trees that span that line of lots 10 and 12. And I'm sorry, I don't know what that was. Yes, so the conifers go along the entire rear property boundary of lots 11 and 12. And then the nearest house, the one at the, which is the northeast corner there, abuts the open space area. And so by retaining those existing trees, we thought that would help mitigate the 5-foot reduction to the setback that we're requesting. And with the closest home being against the open space tract, we thought that would also help to minimize any impact on them. And the reason for requesting that setback reduction for those 2 lots is because of the curve in the street there creates a little bit more of a shallow depth on those lots. And so that's the reason we requested the rear setback on only those 2 lots.
Answer your question, Doug?
It looks like he may have had to run away when that noise happened. I'm wondering if it was a smoke alarm or something.
We'll come back to Doug. Russell, your hand is up next.
Yep, let me get my camera on. There we go. Yes, I do have a few questions as well, and it revolves around the open space. So my first question is about Tract A, that area that sort of is partway in the meadows and partway in the summit, and that is it looks like lots 35, 24, 23, are those going to be, you know, those are those like side fences, back fences, are they going to be 6-foot fences? I mean, is that little park sort of like canyoned in to that, you're shoving it into that little spot? I mean, it's kind of open to the street, but what's it going to be like on the edges? Is that?
I think you'll have a similar effect to what you'll see on Track C in those areas where you'll have lower fencing coming up that flagpole, if you will, to create an opening there so you can see into the space. But then as you get back, you know, to give some privacy to the homes, the fencing would step up to 6 feet as a good neighbor type cedar fence in those areas. So we're trying to balance that dynamic of creating space that's usable, but also providing some, because it is adjacent to the homes, some privacy for the homes as well. So the idea is to create shallow fencing up the throat of that flagpole, if you will, and then transition to the higher fencing.
And speaking of that pathway that goes from the road you're going to create to Tract A, how wide is that? Is that 10 feet wide?
I believe it's 12.
So it's 12 feet wide between lot 23 and 24.
Yes.
And is it a 10.35, by the way?
Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't have that information in front of me.
Is it is it going to be asphalt or cement or natural path? I know
we went back and forth on that with the planning commission, and they would like hard paths. So that's what we agreed to.
What is it they want?
A hard surface path.
Oh, okay. So that would be
most likely asphalt.
Asphalt, and I don't necessarily see any landscaping along the pathway.
Well, there's a lot of stuff going through that pathway, if you will. There will be some storm sewer lines running through there to connect with the storm sewer tract. And so that's going to all be underneath the hard surface. And then you'll have the fencing. And so it was a challenge to fit everything, you know, I guess that people would desire into that little space.
So are you saying there will be no landscaping on either side of the hard path?
Not along the flagpole at this time. We've not proposed that, no.
All right, so I have a question about Tract C, like everybody else does. What percentage of that total space is actually usable? I mean, at what point does it drop off, and at that point, it's really not usable space? What percentage of that? Is it like 80%, 60%?
I would say that that plan that you're looking at there is a fair representation. So the idea is to put a little more fill into the south end there to help raise that up a little bit so we can get some nice usable lawn area in that. And then it would, taper down to a more natural to the north there. So just looking at that, I'd say your trail will be usable, the grass area will be usable. It's just that brown area in the north that will be less usable, and that's to do two things really: to keep the natural area and any natural features that exist in there that we can retain. So we've kind of identified the south area as the area that would make the most sense to fill in and create the lawn area, and then transition to more of the natural topography.
So you mentioned that in that area, you're going to, this is part of that, is it the contaminated soil mitigation where you're going to move it over to that track C and cap it? Is that correct?
This is, and it's my understanding, and maybe Tim can help a little bit, but it is my understanding that the most contaminated soils get removed from the site. The ones that have the lower level of contaminations, it is DEQ's preferred method to have them on site, have them dumped on site and then capped. So, they have you put so much soil depth over top of that once you spread it out. So you will not get down to those soils, but that is actually what DEQ prefers.
And where in tract C is that going to be? Under the lawn, under the natural area in the north? Where would all that soil be?
Throughout.
Throughout. So under the lawn, under the natural area, wherever, under the path?
There is, as you know, this is not a flat site, and it has a very rocky terrain underneath. And so there is significant grading work that has to be done. So in addition to the contaminated soils that they would allow us to leave on site, the capping material would also come from the site. So we're just trying to, be efficient, and haul off is very expensive. And so the more we can utilize the dirt on site to fill in our low spots and move it around, the more efficient it is to develop the property.
Thank you. And can you confirm, are those two walkways going to track C, are they going to be the same width as the walkway going to tract A? And will they also not have any landscaping?
Well, as you can see, when you get into track C, there will be landscaping around the trail, but those access points, to be honest with you, I could see flowers, low shrubs, something of that being located along that area, but I do not anticipate trees, large landscaping, maybe some grasses, flowers, things of that nature could go in that area.
Right. I have just a couple more questions, Mayor. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Between tract E and F, there is a similar walkway, and it looks as though the area for that, it looks like it's even more narrow than the other access points. Is that true? Number one. Number two, that's a sloped area, and it's going to be safely graded? Is it going to be ADA compliant to go from tract E to tract F? What is that going to look like?
That conversation came up a little bit with the planning commission, and we told them it would be very hard to have ADA through, for example, tract A where it matches up with the other tract, just due to the slope. You could never get it to meet ADA. So they did not have that concern, but we told them we would make it a hard surface. And you're right, the reason we have not connected those two tracks, one, they don't align up perfectly. And due to the topography and just being efficient, it made more sense to put in the connection that we're proposing here, which will be a hard surface. I do not know right now if it would actually meet ADA.
Right. And it looks like that pathway will be, you envision it to be very similar, or if not identical, to the other pathways, the access points and the pathway into tract A. Is that right?
That's correct. Okay.
Also, I have just a couple more. Over on the yet to be created road, this is tract G. So are you considering that part of your open space square footage?
Not, as you can see, there's areas that are colored in a yellow brownish shade, and then there's that white strip that's not shaded. The white strip is the street. That's where the street will go.
Right.
So it will not impact the open space, but that one large tree could be impacted by the road that we're going to preserve right now, the existing large oak tree. And so when that property to the north comes in, they might be able to shift that a little bit to help preserve that tree.
So I guess what I'm asking is, right now that's just a gravel road. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, and so that track G is how do people get to it? Do they? Can you access it from out of tract F or from?
You can access it from the street that goes north-south there through Denali Meadows property. So when we do this project, there's a sliver of that road that falls onto the Miller property. That will be completed with this project, and then you'll have full access all the way up to that area.
All right, I think that's all my questions right now, Mayor. Thank you.
So Steve, to be clear, are you saying that at the end of that road going to track G, people will be able to exit your project and go onto the gravel road?
No, they won't be able to exit. That road will be barricaded as a stub road that will be continued with the new street.
Great. Doug had one more question. He's back. So Doug.
Yeah, thank you. Apologize for my false alarm there. I appreciate your earlier answers as well. So, but one last question is, as part of the PUD process, and if someone asked this when I was gone, then just tell me that and I'll watch the video later. As part of the PUD process, you're asking for a number of concessions to the underlying zoning code. Reduced lot sizes, higher density, reduced setbacks in some areas, probably some other things. And part of that is, part of the PUD process is that is given in exchange for a public benefit to the community. And so what I'd really like to hear, and I think this is, was a major topic of conversation at Planning Commission as well, is, for all of the concessions that are being, maybe that's the wrong word, but apologies, for the agreements to these variances that are being made, what is the public benefit that the public would be getting from the approval of this PUD? Because I think that's a very important part of this process.
So first, I would like to note that through the PUD process, we are not asking for any reductions in lot sizes. We are complying with the required lot size. So there's no request for a reduction in the lot size.
Okay, apologies for that one.
We're only asking for some setbacks. And like I said, on lots 11 and 12, the reason for that, I'm not sure if you got that answer, Doug, before you left, but the way that street curves around there at those lots, it shallows those lots up. And so that's why we requested the rear yard reduction of 5 feet on those two lots. And then again, if you didn't hear, we're retaining the existing evergreen trees there. And then the closest house actually abuts the open space. So we think we've kind of addressed impacts to them. In terms of
the road doesn't have to go right where you're proposing it goes. The lots don't have to be that shallow. I mean, that's a choice you're making as the developer. Right.
I'm saying, to make efficient use of the property and the existing houses that we're preserving. This is really what, we're preserving a house on lot 28 and lot 34. And so all these different factors, the topography, the redevelopment of the property to the north, some of the plans that they brought in that they went through pre-apps with the city on, there was a huge effort here just to get to this point through pre-app meetings and everything. And this was the alignment that was preferred. So, and again, retaining the houses had a lot to do with that.
Okay, very well. So I think, back to the bigger point of my question, what is the public benefit that is being received through this PUD process?
Yeah, and I appreciate that question. I've done 4 PUDs in the city of Sherwood, one with D.R. Horton, and now these 3 that we're coming through here with. And that's been a moving target. I don't even think your staff knows how to provide guidance on that. And so as we've gone through these other projects, it's been acknowledged by the city council, by planning commission, that the cleanup is very important to this area. It's very important to get these contaminated soils out of here. So I would say, first and foremost, it's that. I would go in and say that the open space areas, it's understood that providing the 15% open space, which is significantly greater than any other project would have to provide in the city, is 5% for other developments. That when you did the master planning, that was the vision. This will be a public benefit. If you come in, you go through the PUD process, you provide the 15% of open space, you provide some amenities and put them in some locations that they can take advantage of the views that are in that area, that you're creating a public benefit by doing that. And in the first two projects, that was the threshold. That was the burden that City Council and Planning Commission placed upon us. And so we used that as background to move into this project and continue the theme and continue doing what was our understanding was being well received by both the Planning Commission and City Council. So when we got to Planning Commission and all of a sudden it turned to parks and parking lots and all these other things, I'll be honest, we were taken back because that had never come up in the previous ones. You know, I guess I would defer to the City Council a little bit to help us better understand, how do you read that? I mean, how do you read that public benefit? It's very subjective. Everything else that we work off of for these projects are clear and objective, which is what state code requires, is clear and objective standards for subdivisions. But again, you know, another benefit is, as you all know, the state has declared that there's needed housing of all levels in every city in Oregon. And even though these are going to be higher end homes, you know, people who live in the price range below this that have the means will move up to these homes. Then we'll free up those homes, and then other people will move up to those homes and free up other homes. And so, you know, needed housing is a public benefit, and it's been acknowledged by the state that every jurisdiction in the metro area and the state need more housing. So I would say that that is also a benefit, and doing it at the densities that we propose makes efficient use of this land, which is a public benefit inside the city limits. So, and then providing that buffer to Rock Creek by backing up our open space and continuing to keep that space as natural as possible is another significant public benefit.
Thanks, Steve. Just to be clear for the audience and for council, and the nature of a PUD is it is completely subjective within some limits, and for a council to support or not to support, planning commission to support or not to support, to make, there needs to be a benefit for an applicant to propose their own rules to a significant extent. So that's the nature of it, and that's the risk reward of proposing PUDs, of providing, showing something that couldn't be done otherwise with another means that has a clear path. Ken Young, you're next.
Yeah, so I just had a question on the parking on that new road that's going to be developed. Parking on one side, this might be more of a question for staff and they can answer that after. Is that just pretty typical in Sherwood now? Is that we're just doing these roads with parking only allowed on one side? And then my question on the two private roads, which I understand the city wouldn't be responsible for, but they look really narrow. Is there any parking going to be allowed on those narrow roads, or are the overflow from those residents going to overflow and park on the main road?
I guess I'll start with the city has a range of street standards. At the paved width that we are going with, the 28 feet, it is parking on one side. So I anticipate putting that parking on the west side, or, you know, it's kind of the west northwest of that, because there'll be fewer driveways on that side than the southeast side. So that'll help increase parking. Similar to all the other homes and lots that have been created in this area, they're 10,000 square feet. We envision 2 to 3 car garages on each home, with a 20-foot deep 2-car driveway. So, you know, at a minimum, you're going to be able to park 4 cars on the lot, 2 in the garage and 2 on the driveways at a minimum. So I believe that will help. I know that the city of Sherwood has regularly had a concern with parking. And the very first PUD I did, that was significant. And I think that's why we're not trying to create parking areas for people to come into this area. You know, we want them to come from the neighborhood to the west and walk over and walk through the open spaces and walk through the street networks and enjoy this area without having to drive over to here or bike through it, you know, and be able to use your bike through it. And that was an important comment from the Planning Commission when we were talking about the trails, is they were going back and forth between soft and hard, and the reason they wanted hard is so people could bike through these areas. Again, I think we're trying to provide a project that addresses your concerns, that provides as much parking as possible off street on the lots, so we can have parking on the street. Those small private streets will not allow parking on them, so they will be marked no parking, so emergency vehicles can get in and out of there. But again, they're also going to have large driveways with, you know, significant parking available to them. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but we did take all of that into consideration.
Yeah, that answered my question. I mean, I live in Woodhaven with 2 car garages and 2 parking spots, and the reality is most people just don't park in their garage, which is why we have such crowded streets. But that's not your problem to solve. But anyways, thank you so much.
Yes.
Thanks, Kim. Tim?
Thanks, Keith. Yeah, I have a couple questions, and since we just left parking, I want to jump onto that real quick, and it kind of gets to this road. One of the exceptions you're asking for in terms of the standards is tighter radius on those corners, and one of the concessions was going to a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit for safety concerns. I have concerns about sight lines going around those corners, especially with parked cars, especially if you put the parked cars on the west side of the road for that 190-degree turn. Can you talk a little bit about your thinking around that, especially given that this is not ultimately will not be a dead-end street? You know, it will loop all the way through, so there's potential for more traffic on that street.
Yes, as you indicated, it will ultimately loop through that other property to the north. Regarding the on-street parking, I mean, one thing that is possible is we could transition one side to the other, right? So on the very northern portion of the street, it seems like the west side is the better place to add parking, as there'll be, you know, with those private streets, there's no driveways going to that side of the street. So we'll be able to allow that whole side of the street to park cars in between the private streets there. So that's pretty significant. You know, as we get to the curve, we could transition that to the south side, or the, you know, wherever is the safest side of the street to continue on-street parking. And then, you know, again, around the other curve, we could transition to another side. So there are options in terms of how we park one side of the street, and there would be with signage to identify that.
So we do have a couple more questions. We do have wider street standards that would allow for parking on both sides of the street and still allow 2 lanes of traffic to move. Did you evaluate that at all when you went through the planning process?
If you look at most of these lots, we're right at the 10,000 square foot minimum to get this street in, and that had a lot to do with it.
Yeah, because just for information, part of my concern too, because one of the things that's changing in the landscape for all this is HB 2001, which they're going through the rulemaking process right now. So we also have to start thinking about what the potential highest use of these properties are down the road, right? And the potential impacts on parking and all that. So it's part of the reason I'm asking those questions.
Yeah, it's a good question. I would think this would not be the neighborhood where you would get duplexes, triplexes, and that type of housing, especially once this project is built out. I couldn't imagine someone coming in here and adding that, you know, tearing down one of the homes that you're going to get here and building something like that. But I understand what you're talking about.
Yeah, and that's a long-term view, right? That's a 20, 30-year view. These roads will be with us for a long time. So.
Anything else, Tim?
Yeah, I have a couple more. So back to track C, I apologize. I know we've talked a lot about that. I mean, part of our, you know, when we think about our parks master plan and trails within the community, we do want them interconnected. In that particular, I guess, well, let me a general comment. On an acreage point of view, I think, you guys are providing a lot of acres for open space or a lot of space, and I do appreciate that. I'm just more concerned about the placement. And I'm going to ignore track C for a second, but track A, could you talk about what is to the east of track A?
There's 2 lots.
I'm sorry. So outside of this development.
If you're saying what's to the east, it would be lot 24.
I'm sorry, what's to the west? I apologize.
It would be the open space that's associated with the Denali Meadows.
And how is that graded?
Can you, I mean, it's fairly flat, isn't it, Tim?
Yeah, it has some topography to it, but it's relatively flat. It's probably around 4-to-1 slope.
Did you hear that? There is a little slope to it. It's about a 4-to-1 slope.
In the landscaped area portion of
the. In the landscaped area, the browner area, and then it flattens towards the grass area.
So there should be good visibility from the street into that area. I'm worried about creating a little area off on its own where, police and stuff driving by can't see into it and those types of things.
Well, ironically, you're not going to have a lot of fencing from that street that's on the west side of it because there's no lots there, right? So you'll have a fence along the south property line, but then the rest of that will be open from the street. I'm not sure if that helps, but then, as you look further to the east, there's no fencing there because it backs up to the other open space. So you'll be able to look all the way through that space to the fence that's going to be on lot 24.
Okay, thank you. And then I think in the proposal here, the HOA would be responsible for these green spaces. Is that correct?
Yeah, your city parks department has no interest in maintaining these type of spaces.
Okay.
So Steve, someone with the Miller family has raised their hand. Do you want them to be part of your?
Yes, if they have a comment, they are part of our team, and so yes.
Okay. Miller family, you have your hand up.
Good evening, council. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay, this is Brad Miller. My family owns the parcel in the middle. There are a few things that haven't been mentioned, but I think are relevant is we've talked about the track to the furthest to the north and Upper Roy. So there's a few things that are essentially required for our development. One of them is to dedicate that public right-of-way, and essentially our driveway for our existing home goes away. Another thing is that the road or the development out on Murdoch has already been approved. So essentially the configuration of our development is fairly set when you figure that the development to out on Murdoch is already approved and under construction. And the entrance essentially had to go through the gut of our property and then swing over to the U-zones. So a lot of what you see is based on constraints that are really staff required elements. The original developer, Tim, for the property out on Murdoch, he came in for a pre-app with an entrance that showed splitting our lot lines and is essentially was sent packing because it didn't meet any of the restrictions. So that's how we came into the fold. The open spaces that we're matching up to is not necessarily something that was, we took into consideration when we looked at it. It was just already approved, so we had to match up with those situations. As far as looking at the private drives, the thought behind that is we've got to be able to access existing homes. We have topography to deal with both in accessing the homes and dealing with utilities to get to those homes. When you consider, I've heard a lot of talk about the open space and the benefit to the public, and I heard one council member mention Woodhaven. And my family grew up in Sherwood, and that's one thing we've really appreciated was Woodhaven, the walking paths and things like that. And this is really designed after that type of feel, where you may have a narrow pathway that leads you to an open space where you have view, wildlife, drainage corridors. And that is a huge benefit to have that tract C, the largest tract, backing up to that area, not only for future potential connectivity, but for wildlife viewing in the sense that you have a huge open space back there. And it's been mentioned a few times that this is not necessarily for the public to enjoy, but I disagree with that. I think it's designed completely with the public's enjoyment in mind, because one of the things most of us appreciate about Sherwood is being able to walk all around on paths into Old Town and things like that. And this subdivision essentially gives you a mile to walk through this area. And then if the property to the north develops, it lets you add that to it. Another feature of this property is that area will be permanently used for trees and wildlife and things like that with a little lawn area. So just a couple things to mention all as far as the cleanup. The density that you see here is a necessity in order for the cleanup to be done. Without the density, it monetarily just doesn't work. It doesn't work for me to join in with the original developer and put this project together. The challenge with dealing with DEQ is they have such tight restrictions that the haul off and the testing and things like that to get that no further action is a huge benefit to the public and a real challenge for the developers. Another thing to keep in mind as far as the parking is these are larger lots than you'll see in like a Woodhaven or another planned unit development that have 5,000 to 7,000 square foot lots. You've got between 60 to 100 foot of frontage, which allows for a lot more parking than you might typically see for this many homes on a site. And then lastly, when you think about the concessions for the setbacks, that doesn't mean that the builder or the developer plans to go and put his house right on that line. It just gives you some leeway in your design and development to stick a bay window into the setback or to have an eave or an overhang get a little bit closer. We only ask for those things because we have ideas of plans that add to the design, especially on corners or rear lots, that give you a little bit of flexibility to have a design that blends to the neighborhood, but it doesn't encroach on any neighbors. Sorry I was long-winded. I appreciate your time.
Oh, very good. Thank you for the comments.
Thanks, Brad.
So when I looked at this, there are some positives, but there's also some serious negatives that worry me. I'm concerned that it doesn't meet the test in my mind for enough public benefit for a PUD. The tract C would be needed for this site to house lightly contaminated soil. So I wouldn't consider all of that as part of a percentage of benefit, considering other concessions that are on the site. I'm worried about, if this was a straight project, you would have more connections. The track E and F, for instance, would be a through street. Yeah, there's topography challenges, but they could be overcome. I am concerned. I don't like the idea of having a 20 mile an hour, requiring a road to be 20 miles an hour because it's curvy. don't agree with the applicant on the rear setbacks of lot 11 and 12, as Doug mentioned. Yes, you'll maintain the trees there. So that's still a concern. Yes, there'll be lots of on-street parking, even if there's just parking on one side. I'm not overly worried about that, but going in, I thought there was parking on both sides, which was making me much happier. So I'd rather not personally have the council hash out and make adjustments to make it acceptable. My preference would be to, since I don't believe the planning commission kind of understood that they have flexibility in determining if the benefit is there and worth the different concessions that are part of this or not. So it's kind of a creative thing, but I would want to let them take another crack at it. The challenge of my idea is the applicant needs to agree to extend the 120-day rule by 30 or 45 days. So we could put this back in their lap in January and then have it routed back to us. Otherwise, as is, and granted, it's only and we'd have to interrupt our process because this is technically the first of 2 hearings in front of City Council. But if there's support by both the applicant and council, I would rather move it back to Planning Commission for the first week of January, if that meets the noticing requirements, so that they can clearly state if they agree that the PUD provides enough public benefit, be clear that they're willing to waive the rule of the connectivity, that track E and F should be a through street, that they agree to take the risk of having a slow speed road. I don't want another Dewey. I really don't. That's what I see. And see if they support all of the setbacks. So that's what I would like us to do. If everyone, otherwise, you know, in two weeks or whenever this is for the second hearing, I'll be a hard no. The alternative is if we're not, Doug is experienced planner, or he spent time on the planning commission. Russell certainly spent a lot of time on the planning commission. I spent a lot of time on the planning commission. We could work through it, but I'd rather let the planning commission take another crack at it. Tim, thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to jump in on that, the radius of those turns in the road. I know the state gave us the ability to lower speed limits to 20, but that was really against existing design standards and creating more safety and slowing cars down. I'm worried about these sharp corners, sight lines, and safety, especially at night when kids playing on the street and running out between cars. Dewey is a great example of a narrow road that has traffic on it with bad sight lines that we have a lot of issues with. And I would that's an area I'd like to see kind of piggybacking on Keith's idea to have a planning commission maybe take another look at. I'm unclear. I understand the environmental benefit of getting some work done to remediate these sites. I don't know if that translates into wider benefit for the entire community. So I definitely would like to hear more about the planned benefit for the wider community. I'll take my.
Thanks, Tim. Doug?
Yeah, just to follow up on the corners. So, funny enough, I live on a corner that looks exactly like this. It's a 90 degree, but it's not a sharp 90 degree, right? It's this curved 90 degree. And I'd rather have a sharp 90 degree because people, they go around that thing like a racetrack. And I'm in Woodhaven, so it's not like it's a 25-degree residential neighborhood, but because you don't have, like, physically, you can drive your car around that type of corner at 25 to 30 miles an hour. People do. They enjoy it. They cut the corner, right? No matter which direction you're coming from, they're hugging that inside corner because they can do it without slowing down. They can do it without taking their foot off the gas. I see it every day for the 10 years I've lived in this house. And I've seen very, very many near misses, whether we're talking car on car or car on pedestrian or kid. So I share the concern about that street design. I don't know what the alternative is, but I know I'm living that exact same design. To a T, and it'd probably be my least preferable corner design of any. I'd rather have it a hard 90 because at least you have to slow down to take a hard 90.
Doug, when you say a hard 90, like a hard 90 with a stop sign to force people
Well, whether there's a stop sign or not, you can't make a sharp 90-degree turn without slowing down.
Right.
This actually encourages faster turns because you can this physics. It's just basic physics, right? So I share that concern. I don't know what the solution is, but it's definitely a concern that I'm in agreement with.
Yeah.
I guess sorry, I wasn't sure who had the floor.
Erica, you got your hand up?
Thank you, Erica Palmer, Planning Manager. I just wanted to clarify process here, and Josh Sober, please chime in too if you have thoughts. But I'm understanding our code states Planning Commission gives a recommendation to council.
I'm fully aware, Erica. I'm fully aware of the code. I'm fully aware of the process. I'm asking, so my request is going to be to ask the applicant to agree to extend and let the Planning Commission chew on this again if they agree, and if Josh says the right things to make that possible. Josh?
I think that was your cue, Josh.
Yeah, so I mean, as Erica was saying, and as the mayor has acknowledged, there is no process in our code for this to go back to Planning Commission. The process is Planning Commission makes a recommendation, City Council holds a hearing and votes it up or down. That being said,
I'd rather not have the applicant pay another fee and resubmit. I'd rather try to make it right, and I'd rather us not know on it.
Right. So I think the mayor understands, as he's made clear a couple times, that he is proposing something that is outside the usual process, outside the box. There's, of course, some risk in that, but if the applicant agrees to that, that certainly mitigates that risk. I'm happy to answer any questions, but that's the short version of it. There's no process, but if the applicant agrees to it, that certainly makes it simpler.
Steve, what do you think?
We don't know what we're agreeing to yet. What are you sending it back on? What are they going to go back and discuss? Are you going to give them clear direction on what we're doing when we get back there? Or is it just going to be a free for all like we had before?
I'm ready to deny this in 2 weeks. And so I want to let them, and if they use their judgment to answer, does this proposal meet the benefit to the community for a PUD after we're raising concerns that it might not? We want them to reaffirm, or if they think other changes are appropriate, because you're getting other exceptions to the rules that if this was a straight low density residential project, you wouldn't get. So I'd rather have them affirm, maybe make changes, and specifically the issues that I've raised is, provide enough community benefit for the PUD, should track E and F be a real road. What other solution, they may or may not have been aware of the Dewey like road configuration that's been proposed that multiple councilors have expressed concerns about. Yeah.
I guess when it comes to that road, that street design is intended to slow traffic down, which is what we hear time and time again in residential projects is, don't give us a straight street. Cars go too fast through the neighborhood when the street is straight. Please obstruct some of these line of sight so they have to slow down to go slower to get through the neighborhood. And so that's what you're seeing here. And again, as other people have mentioned, we can't develop the use-on property without bringing a street in the proposed location. So we tried to bring a street in where the stormwater track is, right there in line with Denali, as your master plan shows, but we couldn't do that. We had to shift it to the west. And so that's why we had to curve it. We had to go through the Miller property, turn it in to service the use-on property, and then get it to the north to continue its future extension. So I guess I'm at a loss on the street. I don't know what else could be done. The homeowners want to retain the homes. That significantly impacts how the street has to go through these two properties. So I think there's a lot of information on streets with curves that those are very good for residential neighborhoods.
I think for me, it's the reduction in the radius.
Can we see that there's raised hands?
Yeah. So, Kim?
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand, Mayor. I think you said something earlier about maybe, I know we have a few new planning commissioners, of them maybe needing a better understanding of PUDs, and are they going to get sort of that education so that they can help?
Yep, that'd be part of the deal. So yes, that would be part of the deal, to realize that they get to judge if this project reaches the standard for them, because it is very arbitrary. The city council can literally direct staff to have findings, say that we don't find that there's enough public benefit for this project, and we can say any other findings we want and turn it down, and they have no recourse whatsoever. There's no it's just the nature and risk of a PUD to try to do something bigger and better than what they could have done otherwise. I think it's still possible, but for me, there are good things about this, but as is, I could never approve it, support it without changes, and I'd rather let the Planning Commission get properly informed about their rights and tools to review PUDs and see if they still support it in the same way.
So since you disclosed your conversation with the chair, Jean,
yep.
Did you express that concern with her too? And did she make it sound like they would?
I thought I made clear she absolutely, she says I know there is no process for you to send it back to us that's in the code, but she said I would really like us to be able to take another crack at it.
Okay.
With the education on what their role is in this process. Because it was presented, the impression that I was given by Jean from what they got from staff was, here are the findings from staff that meet the requirements of a PUD, and please support our conclusion. That's not, in my mind, the way it should be done. It should be presented that here is what's being proposed, here are options, planning on what you can do in response.
So, Counselor Scott, were you at that meeting?
Yes, I was at the Planning Commission hearing for this. I certainly wouldn't want to speak on behalf of the Planning Commission. I will say my impression of that hearing was there was a fair amount of trepidation about passing this along and recommending it, but because of the deadlines and timelines involved, it was passed along. I'm not saying they would have voted to deny it or not recommend it, but I definitely would agree that there was a feeling in the room. I don't know if it was a majority, but it was a strong feeling by at least, several members of the Planning Commission that they have reservations and would like to be able to explore this further.
So with that, hearing that, my opinion is if the applicant would grant that extension, then I would be in favor of moving it back then for Planning Commission to review again.
Thanks, Kim. Renee?
Yeah, my questioning was going along the same lines as what Kim was asking. I mean, based on the fact that Planning Commission, they recommended the PUD, I was having a hard time following the rationale of asking it to go back to Planning Commission. But what I'm understanding through this conversation, that it's largely based off of the after meeting that you had with Chair Jean, and then is that correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't watch the meeting. I wasn't involved in the meeting when they heard this.
I guess, I mean, it's a playing a game of would have, could have, should have, but I question why some of this wasn't brought up at the Planning Commission meeting itself. It sounds like it's possibly because of new members. I really don't know. I'm supposing at this point, but okay. I just needed clarification. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Renee.
We did go over all these issues with the Planning Commission, every single one of these. And the chair and the vice chair expressed the most concern. There's 3 new members who were quite educated and knew exactly what they were talking about. And they supported it, and they provided comprehensive reasons for why they supported it. And the vote was unanimous to recommend approval. And staff provided them with the same 3 options that they provided you in terms of making a recommendation. You could approve it as is, you could approve it with any modifications that you wanted, or you could recommend deny. And they chose option 2, which was to recommend approval with the conditions of approval that they added to the staff report. So I guess I'm on a different page. I didn't see a lack of understanding. We were there for over 3 hours together with them, talking about this project, and they went around and around and around on what should be sufficient, and it was determined that what we're doing was sufficient based on their own conversations. So I'm surprised that she's saying bring it back now, because again, we spent almost 3+ hours, easily 3, but maybe 3.5 on this conversation about track C.
Yeah. Erica, your hand's up.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to lower it.
Russell, thoughts?
Yeah, I do have a few thoughts. First, I would really like to acknowledge that, I think staff always is trying to do what they believe is best. I believe the planning, as being a member of the Planning Commission for nearly 8 years, we citizens try to do the best that we possibly can. This is a little more complex, and it is a PUD. And I would also like to acknowledge that I think the applicant has done a great job trying to overcome some incredibly complex challenges. I absolutely understand that. But the whole idea with the PUD is it's kind of a give and take. And I personally, for example, I don't know if tract E and F need to be a real street, but maybe it could be a private street. I mean, I know it's sloped, but it seems like that should go through. Maybe it's an alley of some sort, and maybe those, and I heard them called trails, but they're really, you know, kind of cordoned off hard surface paths to the open areas. Maybe they could be a little wider and they could be more trail-like. And I don't know, I just feel like I kind of agree with the mayor and with President Rosner and with Councilor Scott that I think it's great that we're doing this, but I already got the impression from the applicant that, you know, the tract C is kind of, you know, it's not for you. It's for the people who live there. Well, suddenly I feel less inclined. I feel less like, well, what is the public benefit? That's one of the big concerns with the PUD. I think we're very, very close. I think we're very close, but I think maybe just some tweaks. So I do have my own reservations. So Mayor, that's my 2 cents.
If you could share with us your, you know, it would be very helpful to share what you like and where the concerns are. You know, instead of us just going back with this open book, direction is really important in this situation. So we can have a better conversation. If we go back to Planning Commission, it's important that the City Council provides a clear direction on what we're going back for. What are we actually looking at?
All right,
And what needs to be refined?
Steve. Thank you. I'll call on you next. So, Steve, you risk, I'm going to ask, and we could bring it up again January 5th as well, but are you supportive of us remanding it, sending it back to the Planning Commission for them to take another look at it and add 45 days to the 120-day clock? Or would you like to leave it with City Council under the current timeline?
I would ask for a 5-minute recess so I can go on mute and chat with my clients and get back to you.
Can we just speak to it now?
Thanks.
Okay, if you're ready to go, yeah.
Can we speak to this now?
Yeah, sorry. It sounds like they're ready to go.
Well, I'm one half of the applicant.
So we'll need the Miller family to join the conversation.
So this is going to be my take on this from what I'm hearing as of right now. Again, this is a joint effort between myself and the Millers. And this could not happen, it could not exist without that joint effort. The properties were not developed. The joint effort of both in just working with the city, designing this property, working with DEQ to clean the property up, as it was mentioned earlier by Brad Miller. It's a cost analysis for us for what makes sense, what we can do to make this work, to benefit both the city with the improvements that we're doing, for the public improvements we're doing for the city, and as for the development. We've been through all the processes. I personally, my candid emotions are that the chair, the Planning Commission, has a issue with the Southeast Master Plan, and that our project wants to be and needs to be more in compliance of that concept plan that was expressed by her over and over and over again. And I'm not sure that we totally satisfied her wants or her concerns. I'm not sure that we said the right things, but this is where we are. I personally, my one half, I need to talk to the Millers. I'm not interested in backtracking. I'm not interested in extending. If this doesn't meet, there's a number of issues and a number of concerns. I heard one councilman say, we're close, we just need to tweak it. I hear the mayor say there are 6 or 7 major concerns that we have to address. It doesn't sound like this thing is going to satisfy the majority. It doesn't sound like this thing is going to meet with the direction or with the approvals. If we have to extend this, I need to go back to the owners, the usons, or I need to exit the project. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense for me to go back through this 3 and 4 and 5 times. We've been through the process. We spent a substantial amount of time with the city, with the planners, with the engineering of the city, to get where we are now. I feel like we comply with the rules, the municipal codes. I feel like we have satisfied everything we need to satisfy. So for me, to change my mind would be to have that conversation with the Millers and see what their attitude is going to be from their perspective on this project.
Okay. The Millers have their hand raised. I'll call on them. Oh, hand is down. Okay, Eric, you have your hand up?
Sorry, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm Brad Miller. I'll speak on our behalf. I would agree with Tim. The likelihood of this application going away is really high for us. The changes that you guys see to the standards have all been requested and asked for by the city engineer. We've requested modifications to get all those things to work. A lot of that has to do with rock that is there on site, with utilities that are available to access through our properties, with transportation plans. To go even further on our property, the entire configuration is designed around meeting transportation plans, site distances, design modifications, as well as the request from the planners, with keeping the existing homes so that it's monetarily feasible to do the project. Both Tim and I think, are probably at the same point where likely future delays make it not. Any major changes to the configuration make major parts of the project just not work. So we're years in. I came in front of this parts of this city council back when Tim was going through Denali, to ask for a few things, which Tim granted. But if you look at the north end of our property, there's utilities going in at this moment that meet that type of configuration, because the properties are so linked. There's just not that much flexibility in our design because of the city's transportation plan and their requirements. So for me, I'm with Tim. There's just not room in it for us to continue on. And it makes a big challenge because essentially we may or may not even have access eventually if we don't get something to work here because of the design configuration to the north. This is really unexpected, and a major problem for us as residents of Sherwood and as contractors.
Okay. So with that, we'll close the public hearing for this meeting. As there is no interest in extending the 120-day rule by the applicant today or sending it to the planning commission. I would ask, so we are scheduled to see this again in 2 weeks. Staff, I'd like to see findings from you to present as options for city council that removes the variance on the setbacks of lot 11 and 12. That finds another solution for the road, so you don't have a slow road that clones Dewey, be it Doug's suggestion of 2 right-hand turns or something else for that road. I'd like to see language that creates a narrow road with no parking on either side, connecting tracks E and F as a road. A finding requirement that for the public access paths, they have to be remained open. There's no gates or fences to block them. Yeah, those are the findings of fact that I'd like staff to bring back for council to consider in the second hearing. Any other comments or Doug, your hand's up.
Fine. I jumped the line, but I'm sorry, Kim. I'd like to echo, I think something that Councilor Griffin said. I think it's close. I think we're close. I think we can get there. And I think all of those things that you mentioned, Mayor Mays, and potentially a couple others that have been talked about through this meeting, I would agree that I'd like to see come back as options that we can discuss in the next meeting, like individually, right? Like we can as a group like decide we're going to add this one, we're not going to add this condition, we are going to add this condition.
Yep.
But so we can kind of pick from a menu, so to speak, and kind of debate each one individually. I don't want it to be like an all or nothing situation. I don't think that's fair. And I agree. There's a lot of constraints that have been put upon the applicants outside of their control, and I think they're definitely doing their best effort to make it happen. And I think we can get there. I think we can get there.
Did you have any other things that you'd like staff to bring back as options to be vetted?
I think we've touched on them all. I don't need to repeat.
Thank you, Doug. Kim.
Yeah, I think Doug just pretty much hit everything I was going to say. I think the applicants have put a lot of work into this, and I know time constraints are always difficult. So with that being said, it has been brought forward to us from Planning Commission. So if we have to hash out the details ourselves, those requests that you just put from staff to bring back to us, and that's the conversation we need to have on January 5th, and see if we can find something that's satisfactory that the majority of us can approve.
Thank you, Kim. Eric? Did you want your hand raised, Eric?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Mayor Mays. So just wanted to touch on, because I know it sounds like the Planning Commission chair had some concerns about the staff presentation report. I just want to speak on, as I was the staff member on the presentation and staff report, staff would, we would absolutely not, put forward a presentation or staff report that appeared like there wasn't other options. So it's a little tough to hear, but I just want to be clear that the staff recommendation is exactly that. It's a recommendation, and we're, as staff, always happy to chat before the hearing, if it's specific questions related to PUD or anything else. So
we're gonna fix future PUD approaches. At least
thank you.
Suggestions. But thanks, Eric.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Mays.
Julia?
Yeah, I just wanted to, offer, I'm maybe being a little protective of my staff and thinking about the holidays and when packets are due. And it sounds like there's quite a bit of finding and finessing that you want done. And I guess I would like to broach the idea, since we have time within the 120-day time period, to not have this come back for a second reading on January 5th, but do it on January 19th instead. So just to kind of give staff a little bit more time to kind of work that through, and then also make sure it's working with the applicants still as well. So just wanted to kind of put that out there as an idea for discussion.
Is that still within the 120 days?
It is, yes.
Then,
but to make it clean, I think that would be difficult. I'm kind of worrisome about that idea. Russell?
I just wanted to, sorry, I got choked up. I just wanted to, one of the other items that we talked about was, and I like Steve's comment about maybe we could alternate parking, depending on, what seems best and safest. And so that I just wanted to add that to the list of considerations. I don't know if that's a Bob Galati thing or whatever. But I mean, I just feel like, we all, those of us who've been here long enough lived through Dewey and parking on both sides. And we've been around that bend so many times. Personally, almost hit a couple of kids. And, I think Doug's right, Steve's right as well. The curve is meant to slow traffic down. People probably generally go faster on a straight piece of road. But there's, I live right by the change between First Street and Oregon Street, and that little jog that happens, in front of the Springs. It's like the Disneyland Autobahn right in front of my house. I'm not kidding. People come around that. I expect to hit two wheels on some of those, but that is the reality, and I see that happening. So I feel like we also have, this has been a lot of work, but we also have the public, safety at heart here. And I agree with Doug. I think that we can get pretty close. So I appreciate staff and all the time they put into this, and the applicant as well. So I just wanted to make sure we don't leave parking out. That was it.
Thanks, Russell. Tim?
Yeah, I just want to say too, I mean, this is I mean, from a geological point of view, this is scab lands with topsoil on it. I mean, I sympathize immensely with what the applicant has had to go through to make this work. It's difficult land to develop, and I think all of us aren't insensitive to that. We tend to focus on the issues that we see, but that doesn't negate all the hard work and positives that you guys have put into this. I think the list the mayor came out with is a good list for us to consider individually, not as a whole, as Doug pointed out. I think I share the concerns on the safety of that road. To give some more context on that, I mean, I would argue that on the Dewey example we use, in certain conditions, 20 miles an hour is not safe on that road, especially when all the garbage cans are out, and it gets really narrow on garbage collection day. So finding ways, when I say finding ways to make that safer, that doesn't necessarily mean completely changing the layout and how that road is routed. The parking solution that came up might be a good idea. Not allowing parking on the curve to maintain sight lines. I mean, those are the types of things that I would hope staff would come back with some recommendations on. I'm not a transportation planner, so they might have ideas that I'm not even thinking about right now. Those are just the obvious ones that come to mind from my own personal experience driving around Sherwood. And then the only other thing too, just to clarify, and I think Mayor Mays mentioned it, for the trails and the open space, since this will be maintained by the HOA, how do we ensure legally that it stays open to the wider public, and that we don't have a situation where the HOA shuts that down, and how does that happen? Just to make sure that those trails remain open to anyone who wants to use
them. Doug, your hand's back up.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify my comment about that curve. I think it might have been misconstrued. I certainly absolutely agree. If you had a road that was connecting the two endpoints in a straight line, that is worse, and that would lead to potentially faster traffic. That wasn't the point I was trying to make. The point I was making was the difference between a rounded 90-degree curve and a sharp 90-degree turn, which is, I live on the rounded curve in my neighborhood, and I can tell you just emphatically that people fly around that in a much faster rate of speed versus a 90-degree sharp turn that may or may not have a stop sign at it. Again, it's basic physics. I will say about the parking on that, though, the best deterrent to people speeding around that is actually parking a car on the inside radius of that curve. It certainly hurts the sight lines, but it slows the cars down significantly. So that's it.
And Eric. Did you mean to have your hand up, Eric?
I do not. I'm keeping it up. Sorry about that, Mayor.
It's all right. So from a timing standpoint, if we moved it to the 19th, I don't know if we could have a clean packet when we would select options. If council wanted to support the applicant or the application with any of the menu of texts that has been suggested. Josh, Julia, do you have that concern? I mean, granted, if we're at that point and we're not ready and it's going to be without an extension, it's a denial, then at that point it's kind of clear. Or
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, we could just have individual motions. We could debate each one, have a motion individually, whether to add that one as a condition of approval or not, and then go to the next one, and et cetera, and then ultimately vote on the revised resolution. Am I correct?
Julia,
that's correct. That's correct. So that does make for, as the mayor is suggesting, that does make for a little bit more convoluted process at the hearing, trying to finalize all of that and make your final decision all in one hearing. But of course, the flip side is if you don't postpone it till the 19th, I think staff has a very small number of business days between now and when the packet deadline is due to get all those changes worked up. So between the two, I mean, I defer to Julia, but it sounds like to me probably the 19th is more feasible.
Julia, do you stand by your request?
I do, and I would love to see some nods from the applicants, even though they're not testifying, to see whether or not they agree with me or not. But I think that would give us time to really make sure that we're getting your points and talking with them and making sure that we're recommending conditions that are going to work for them. Well, we'd hate to come up with our recommendations that we think are going to make you happy, and then they object to all of them, and then we aren't any further along. So I think giving us until the 19th will give us a little bit more time to get that done without the rush of the holidays and all that stuff. And then if we get to that point on the 19th where there's just a little bit more work, then we continue it 2 more weeks for staff to put something together based on council action.
Would 2 more weeks be beyond the 120 days?
No, 120 days is the 26th.
Or, I mean, if you get to that on the 19th and we did need an extension, then I would imagine they would be more likely to give you an extension for a week to pull everything together and approve something than the unknown to potentially not get an approval.
Gotcha. Okay.
I just want to echo on that. I think it's important that staff have time to work with the applicant. I think that's a really good point, that we don't want to have suggestions coming forward that the applicant can't live with. Because I think at the end of the day, we'd love to see this land developed. It's a hard piece of land to develop. I tend to agree with Councilor Scott. I think we're close. So let's get it done. Let's get it done right.
Sean.
Yep, I'm just jumping in to reiterate the same thing. I feel Julia's pain, and I appreciate you looking out for the staff. I also work for the state of Oregon, and I know that starting on Monday of next week, there's not going to be anybody around for 2 weeks. And so I don't want to put anybody into a position that they're rushing anything. I think we have some questions, some good questions that we're raising, some good issues that I think I'm a compromise kind of guy. I think that can be worked out. I think we need some answers to some questions that we have. It's unfortunate that we are where we are, and I hear the applicant and I hear the pain and the anger that's coming from them. I know they've been at this for a long time, and I appreciate that they haven't used more words than I probably would have tonight. So I appreciate that they've hung with us here tonight. So I think it's probably in our best interest to get this work done as best as we can to come back on the 19th. Some work that's been that goes back to them. I don't know if we can do anything, if there's any questions that like the Planning Commission has that can be interjected into this, or do we have to probably stay away from them at this point? But I think we need the extra time, and if we can get it right, I think we can work out the details from the 19th on. So.
Thanks, Sean. With that, we need to have a motion to take the second meeting to the 19th, correct, Josh? Or can staff just post it?
Julia, we haven't already advertised anything, have we?
I'm going to defer to Erica and yeah, I think that we assume that the second reading is, we announce when it's going to be, but if we announce this evening that it's going to be, the second reading is going to be on the 19th, then that is essentially the notice.
Correct.
Okay. And we don't need any motions at a first hearing of an ordinance. So unless planning staff has anything that I'm missing, I don't think we need any action. We received our direction.
Thanks, Josh. I just want to make sure if we do continue to that later date, is it the 17th? So the 120 days is January 26th. And so if the city council were to issue a decision on the further date, then there wouldn't, we could issue the notice of decision, I assume, in, the next working day or so. Josh, is there any timeline that we need to work in for an appeal? Because I know that the appeal would go to the Land Use Board of Appeals. Do we need that 2 weeks built in after the hearing?
Yeah,
no, we have made our final.
I was going to say, I think that the appeal, the 120 day is all local appeals, and because council's the final decision maker, as soon as we issue the decision, we've met that 120 day period.
Yep, the words out of my mouth. Thanks, Julia.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, so I think we're done with the first public hearing, and it's only 9:37. So this is why it's fun to work on land use in a meeting, folks. This is great. Second public hearing is ordinance 2020-013, amending chapter 3.25 and 5.30 of the Sherwood Municipal Code relating to marijuana taxes and businesses and declaring an emergency. Josh.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, City Council has discussed the results of the November 3rd election as it related to the ballot measure 34-299 at virtually every City Council meeting since, I believe, and this one is no exception. So at the December 1st meeting, City Council formally accepted the canvassing of the results and amended the city code in alignment with the ballot measure legislation. As we discussed at that time, staff is preparing some cleanup ordinances, and we're anticipating this time there'll be 2 separate ordinances to address some gaps and some other housekeeping type issues related to the ballot measure legislation. We split that into 2. This is the first of the 2. It relates to everything other than land use. The second one will be coming to you later, and that will address just the land use issues. And that's separate because there's a different process and notices required to DLCD, et cetera, in order to amend that part of the code. So this first ordinance, as I said, does everything other than the land use part of the code. And specifically, there's a little bit of housekeeping to update some statutory references. There's a broadening of chapter 5.30 to apply to all marijuana businesses, not just recreational businesses, in order to have that alignment between recreational business regulations and medical marijuana business regulations that we discussed at our previous meeting. We also did, as we discussed at the previous meeting, we moved the hours of operation language into chapter 5.30. That language is still in the land use code, but the second ordinance will remove it from that code. So that puts it into the outside of the land use code where it fits better. And then most importantly, and the reason why we're bringing this on an expedited basis, is to add some language to allow the city to designate the Department of Revenue to administer the tax on our behalf, and to include some language that the Department of Revenue requires to be in there if they're going to administer the tax regarding interest and penalties, and giving them authority to assess those. And so in order to have the Department of Revenue start collecting the tax on our behalf on January 1st, 2021, when this measure goes into effect and when their quarter tax collection cycle begins, staff is recommending that council approve this ordinance unanimously in a single hearing on an emergency basis to make it effective January 1st, rather than the typical 30 days after the date of adoption. And I am happy to answer any questions anyone may have.
Questions of Josh?
Sounds pretty straightforward.
I move that we recaption and adopt ordinance 2020-013, amending chapters 3.5 and 5.30 of the Sherwood Municipal Code relating to marijuana taxes and businesses and declaring an emergency.
Second.
Thank you, Renee, for the motion, and Sean the second. Sylvia?
Ordinance 2020-013, amending chapter 3.25 and 5.30 of the Sherwood Municipal Code relating to marijuana taxes and businesses and declaring an emergency. Councillor Scott, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councillor Griffin?
Aye.
Councillor Browse?
Aye.
Councillor Young?
Aye.
Councillor Garland?
Aye.
Council President Rosner?
Aye.
Mayor Mays?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Council and Sylvia. City Manager report.
So Mayor and Council, in light of the clock, which is getting close to 10 o'clock, and we still have a work session after this business meeting, I just want to open it up to any questions the Mayor or Council may have for myself or my team that is on the call.
I certainly want to wish you and the team a very Merry Christmas and a safe and happy holiday and New Year's.
Thank you.
It's been a challenging year, and everyone has excelled with the weight of all these challenges, and everyone is very, very, very much deserving some R&R and Merry Marys and some Happy Happies.
And a much better 2021.
We hope.
Yes. Thank you, Mayor.
You bet. Any questions of Joe and his team? Awesome. Council announcements?
I suggest we forego council announcements unless there's anything critical.
Agreed.
I have nothing.
Awesome. So with that, we are going to adjourn City Council and then reconvene to finish our work session.
We need to leave this meeting and go into another team meeting.
Why don't we we don't have another one set up unless Brad wants to resend it out. We can just stay on this.
Or we could go back to the first one.
Okay.
Or
What's
we
your
can stay
preference,
here.
Mr. Mayor?
Let's end this one and go to the other one.
Okay.
Weird. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.